And if we don't change our assumptions, I mean, we can have discussion about what the assumptions are and whether they should or should be changed. I think if, just keeping in mind that if we increase anything in our expenditure side, we're not going to see those kind of increases in our revenue. So as you look at either one of the three tables, increasing expenditures is just going to get us to a negative fund balance sooner. If we were building inflationary factors, if we were increasing salary, wages, whatever we decide to do to make the expenditures different assumptions, it's going to change that trajectory. So I think bottom line is, as we look forward for our next 5 years, we have to make some changes, and whether that's changing class sizes, if it's changing curriculum, if it's changing whatever it is that we need to change, the reality is that our expenditures are going to exceed our revenue. And then the appendix in here, I've got the breakout of the 3 different scenarios in table 1A, B, and C, so you can see where the revenue and expenses are. Again, I put the enrollment projections, and then also the third thing is the operating referendum for all of comparable districts in the area.
Yeah, thank you for the different scenarios. That really helps a lot.
Tammy, how much of the appendix 3 includes tech levy, or are they all
So
combined, or just operating levy?
the fourth column is essentially either capital levy or what they call tech levy.
Okay,
It could be either one.
okay.
I have a question, but Julie, Director Burnett, it was the 2016 Say Yes Committee. That's where I saw your name on the finance report. That's what I was referring to. I apologize that I wasn't clear on that. So I have a question, and so if our enrollment was similar to 2018 and 2019, and it cost us 91 and 96 approximately million to educate our students at that time, can you help me understand why it would cost 116 million now? I mean, I understand there's inflation and all those things, but I'm trying to understand if you get the same number of students, same number of staff, and maybe more, because we do have more. I mean, I looked at the numbers. Why does it cost 16 million more dollars to educate the students?
Every year we have several collective bargaining agreements. They all have increases over the years. We have inflation in some of our utilities. Our insurance has continued to go up. Our
Transportation
has gone up.
since then.
The software has gone up, curriculum has gone up. I mean, everything that we pay for has gone up. Some of those we can't control. The salaries are the salaries, and unless we make decisions to reduce the number of staff, we have to continue to pay our staff. So expenses are going to continue to go up.
No, I understand that. I'm just trying to, in my mind, understand if you have the same number of students. And then, like in 2017, I was looking at the enrollment projections, and I thought I read somewhere that it said that we were projected to be at this year at like 10,000 students. So when we passed this referendum back in, 2017, wouldn't we have accounted for that? I mean, I know you weren't here, so I don't expect you to answer that. I'm in just my mind, I'm trying to understand if we asked for a certain dollar amount back in 2017 and we projected
So
an
I would
increase in enrollment.
assume that that increase in enrollment would be at the pupil units, not just the straight enrollment. So pupil units, any students from 6th grade through 12th grade count as a 1.2 in the pupil units. If you multiply that out, it's just shy of 10,000 would be our pupil units. And some of the formulas are based on pupil units rather than just straight enrollment.
Tammy, could
Did you,
We estimated wrong. I think that's the big thing, and I just want to get that out of the way. They estimated high, and they purposely put the operating levy lower because they didn't think the voters were going to vote for something that was any higher. So, and we are where we are as a result. It was a move that I think that now we're looking at the numbers and probably regret. But that's the bottom line. So it's not Tammy's issue, it's not Dr. Thomas's issue. It was something that was done back in 2016 and 2017. Some of the numbers were just plain wrong. And some of it was just based upon a feeling that this district was tax averse. And therefore they purposely did not put an inflationary factor, and also probably knocked in half what we could have done as far as the operating levy. And as people were aware, when we first built Red Tail Ridge, it had to sit empty for almost a year because the building referendum was passed, but the operating levy, in order to keep it going, was not passed. So I think there was some issues there. I wasn't part of that at that time, but I do remember the sentiment at that time, and also that the enrollment projections were inflated.
I appreciate.
So we are where we are, but unfortunately now we are where we are, and unfortunately, the thing that upsets me is that we are still far behind all of our competing districts with what we are taxing, what we are levying. And we didn't pass the tech levy, which other districts do have. So we are spending less per pupil, and the prices have gone up. And my time, as I mentioned, the transportation cost has gone up $2.5 million since I first got on the board. And unfortunately, our operating levy and our income has not kept up with that inflationary rate. So, and we do have bargaining units that do increase every year. And unfortunately, even though the state gave us quite a bit of money, a lot of it was in mandates that I think the net variable spend we actually got was somewhere around $750,000, which doesn't even come close to keeping up with the inflationary factors and being able to give the percentage increases that our staff deserve. So we're in this situation, and we got to figure out what we're willing to give and what we're willing not to give, and how we're going to get to a point where we can not end up in statutory operating debt and actually end up being able to give more to our students than we currently do compared to other districts.
I think one of the things that is not unique to us, but I think a lot of districts were kind of at this point 3 years ago, and we're having to start having these conversations about how we can make some cuts and be a little more strategic in how we spend money. And then COVID happened, and then they sent billions of dollars out. I mean, we got $7.5 million. So that just meant now we don't need to have that conversation. Now the COVID money's gone, and now we got to have that conversation.
We did have the conversation right before COVID where we had to make significant cuts where other districts weren't, simply because our operating levies, et cetera, and our lack of tech levy wasn't there. So we didn't have the income, and we had the additional building space. We had the already inflationary factors hitting us straight on. So it did hit us then. But like you said, COVID gave us not a reprieve. It was more of a facade, I think, with everything that happened. Now we're back to reality. The COVID dollars are gone.
Extended the fiscal cliff.
Exactly. That's a perfect statement there.
And it impacted enrollment in public schools, and it impacted locally enrollment in our county, and the birth rates have changed significantly.
Well, they didn't change. They were projected. The birth rates were projected that by 2025 across the state and actually across the nation, 18 and younger were going to be the lowest growth. And that was the scary part, that we knew we were going to get hit. But you know what we did get? Didn't we get significant funding from from low enrollment, from negative enrollment also during COVID, I thought.
That was
actually,
part of the formula.
Yeah,
for
that
the
actually
funding.
buffered
Yeah.
the impact, which gave us kind of a reprieve, extending that fiscal cliff,
Yeah,
as
that's
Director
not
Gillespie
yours.
said.
That was-
Yeah.
Yeah, two-parter. Tammy, could you give me a layman's terms, especially for the people, well, for me, and for the people maybe tuning in still, a good definition of what statutory operating debt means? And then, second part is, there are some recommendations in here, but at what point, net, what are the recommendations and who brings those forth? Is that a combination of everybody with administration? Is that part of what we're talking about tonight? Or I guess, excuse me, net, where do we go from here? And who brings forth recommendations that we need to talk about? So, sorry, big time two-parter. I didn't mean to put it together like that, but.
So statutory operating debt basically says that you have to maintain a positive fund balance. That your fund balance needs to be a certain percentage, I think it's 2.5% of your operating
Sure, okay.
expenditures. And if you go below that, then you're considered to be in statutory operating debt. And what usually happens then is the Department of Education, as you put together a 3-year corrective action plan that they will monitor and help you get through for the next 3 years. After 3 years, typically if you haven't gotten out of statutory operating debt, then the state will make decisions on how you will accomplish that.
After the 3 years, you said.
Tammy,
Well, the part two is very big, so.
But it's valid,
I
and
appreciate
that's
that
why we're
there's
here.
more to it.
No, I'm sorry. Just-
Well, I mean, I speak for Dr. Thomas, but we are putting together a new strategic plan. I think it's more of a holistic approach. What do we need to do moving forward? We know we can't continue on this trajectory without making some kind of changes. And I can give you my opinion on what I think would be I don't know, I don't want to say best, but one likely option. But you all may have a different opinion on what that looks like.
Yeah, and I would say that the conversation tonight is to bring this into more of a formal dialogue with the board for us to understand kind of where is the board in terms of your vision for the investment of education for this community. That's what we're trying to gain from this conversation. We've put together some conversation starter scenarios. We're not at a point where we are coming to you with a final recommendation, but based upon feedback that we hear tonight, perhaps through some of our one-on-ones, as we have conversation with the community, we have a town hall coming up next week, whenever, Monday. So we're gonna be taking in this feedback, but to Tammy's point, doing nothing is not an option. And I think, when I hear conversations of, well, this district does this or this district does that, and you kind of look at some of these districts and you see, the funding differences, there's a lot that we could do if we had comparable funding. Whether it's at the full load or whether it's at even where we're at tied to inflation. It's not going to solve the issue, but we could do something different. But to Tammy's point in sharing some of the data, this is a structural problem that won't go away by itself. We won't get enough influx of enrollment to solve this issue, which is a large influx of dollars that come at the local level. So in the absence of that, how do we balance the demand of community wanting X performance X experiences, X kind of classes, schedules, whatever, fill that in, juxtaposed to the cost of maintaining or achieving those. And I think that's what we're trying to discern in our conversations. But at the end of the day, we know that if this is a structural problem that's going to take an investment strategy, because you couldn't cut your way out of here. There's just really, in a small district like this, we're very lean as it is. And so are there some things that we can tweak and do differently? Yeah, we can tinker on that. But it's not a reduction strategy. I think this is an investment strategy, which is going to be a conversation we're going to have with our community come next November, or so, because I don't want to wait 3 years to have this conversation that we know where this train is going. So if we can see this in various scenarios, what's the conversation we want to bring forward to our community? That's the question that, I'll be pushing our team on.
I just want to say, I believe you can't do the same things and expect different results. And whether it's MCA results or, like you said, funding. But I think one thing we need to be really conscious of is that we have been criticized as a district for not being financially responsible. And so when, I understand 84% of our expenses are personnel. And when I look back at personnel from 18 and 19, where our total number of employees was 585 to 595, and last year around 600. Now I know we made some investments, but I think what we really need to look at is with that breakdown of employees, whether it's admin, support staff, special ed teachers, or teachers, where do we see the biggest growth? And that is perhaps, I think before this is just my own personal opinion, knowing what I know from what I've heard from the community, I think we need to look at what we've done in the last 5 years and how financially responsible we've been for the investments that we have made, and if we need to make changes.
Can I get maybe I'm misunderstanding, is that employee count accurate?
Not for all employees. I'm assuming she's referring to teachers only.
Okay.
No, I'm referring to, it's.
If it's 500 or 600, that's not all employees.
Well, I show we have, oh, it's recorded as total admin staff 39.3 is what it says. And then for total
Which
classroom
report is
teacher, it
this?
says 406.7. It's a report called Independent School District Full-Time Equivalent District Employees by Type. Full-time equivalent.
From where?
I received this when I first started. I received it from Tammy. Yeah, and back in 2019, our admin full-time equivalent we were at 26, and now we're at 39.3. And then teachers, we were at.
Number I don't understand what that number means.
It says
I think we'd have to look into it
full-time
deeper to
equivalent.
determine who was under what category and did the category change and the definition of the category, because it was based off of the STAR report. The STAR report changes every single year, so what's considered an admin changes year to year. It's not comparing apples to apples, so without seeing the report and being able to have a chance to dig into it deeper, I don't know. But our total staff number is closer to 1,100 with about 200 additional casual folks. So we are typically around 1,300 W-2s.
Okay.
But that's head count.
Thanks.
As well.
And I've counted the number of admin, and technically we did decrease per student. Over time, we didn't add, so that was a conversation a couple years ago when there was a misperception about the increased number of administration. So I went and added it all up, and I cleared it with finance a while ago, as well as adding it up off of our directories, and that doesn't sound right either.
Yeah, I can send the report to you that I received.
But nonetheless, there is, we can't change what happened before. So the only thing we can do is, and we've already cleaned up a lot of the finances, thanks to Tammy, made them more direct, cleaned up our open positions, made a lot of changes that I am personally incredibly happy with. But the bottom line is that we don't have enough money, and we have always been lower per spend per student when you break it down. And if we do want to do what other districts are doing and what we like to compare ourselves to, we're going to have to make that investment as a community. We also know that our schools are it's a circular reference, right? Our community is a reflection of our schools. People move into our community for our schools. If we invest in our schools, we will expect more of an influx into our community. So one helps the other. And we have to make that decision and what we're going to invest in and how we're going to invest in it. And if we do go out to the community and ask for more money, we have to be really, really clear about what that money will get them.
Yeah, and I think that and what is the return or the promise, and having the accountability oversight on those dollars, so that there's again a continuous monitoring process. If we said we were going to ask for these 5 things, and this is the dollar amount, and this is over X amount of years, what does that look like, and how are we reporting that back? We don't have some of those oversight committees from 17. It didn't exist when I was asking questions about that. So to a couple of your points, why would the community trust? So we've inherited some of that. I get it. And we can sit here and live in the woulda, shoulda, couldas. But I do agree that if we're going to have this conversation moving forward, there's a level of accountability that the team has already heard from me that needs to be in place before we even go public. Because, like it or not, this is the reality that we're living in. And it will be time that demonstrates to this community of that return on the investment. Because we also know we're living in an era where folks are pinching pennies from every different angle for how they can do things. And so when we make the ask, we need to be very clear, if that's the direction that we go, we need to be very clear what that means.
And kudos to Tammy and your team, because I believe that this 5-year forecast that was, brought forward to the finance committee before, and they gave feedback, and it was authentic and involved. Like, that's the first step in that accountability piece, and so we build on this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is an example, and Tammy shared this, of this committee structure that's also that we pushed for changing those last year. This is a direct reflection of feedback from committee work. So our community is going to be engaged with us in this conversation, no matter where the end stop is. Whether we go forward or not go forward, they will know the why behind our rationale. And that's the most important thing, because 10 years from now, when positions change and folks are in different spaces, they got to be able to make meaning. We're struggling. Again, I'm not trying to throw shade, but we struggle trying to recreate how we got to where we're at. So one of the things that I shared with the team, and I'll stop with this, is that we might not be a growing district, but we're a maturing district, and not like getting old. I'm saying maturing in terms of the organizational age. We need systems and procedures in place. We're not this small little young handshake district any longer. And so I think that's part of our challenge too, and I think our community recognizes that. And that's something that doesn't necessarily exist to the level that I think maybe our community would expect in an organization of this size, with this level of budget, et cetera. So whether it's finance, HR, curriculum, like our whole senior team, we've had this conversation. So it is about putting together systems, procedures, documenting our whys, so that we can replicate or not replicate mistakes of the past, or replicate the things that are working well and demonstrate how we're making that return on the investment to our community. Not just a financial investment, just choosing Prior Lake Savage area schools. That's the investment, you know, big kind of general picture.
Do board members have any other feedback or, you know, after digesting this, feelings on, I don't think we're looking for directional, you know, a big aha moment today, but I think we're looking for things like what resonates with you, what opportunities do you see, what doesn't resonate with you when you look at this, you know, throwing questions out here and trying to generate any feedback.
I mean, I think our strategic work, if we're going forward with a strategic plan work, that's gonna dictate a lot of feedback from the community, and will determine a lot of, you know, knowing how we move forward with this as well, so. I think it's great, I appreciate all the work you did, it's very insightful to go through the different scenarios and understand what it potentially looks like, so thank you.
I think if I were to say anything is, as we go through the conversations, just how you gave the different scenarios, maybe there could be different scenarios of what could be done, right? You know, well, this is page 28 of the book, of my board printout, but you said, you know, we must consider reductions in contracts and supply spending if we are to keep our expenses within our projected revenue. You know, what does that look like? What could it look like? And so I hope that we can, just as you shared the different scenarios going forward, when we're making decisions, having different scenarios to look at as well. I mean, giving more options for us to think about, I think is always helpful. You know, Tammy, you mentioned like you could give your thought of what might be the best idea. Well, I sure want to know, because your thought I might adopt as my thought, right? Because right now I don't have a lot. I just think, okay, what do we do?
Some of this will come through some value propositional conversations with community.
Right.
So again, just they're the top two things, and I might not have the verbiage exactly correct, but recall back to August or so when we had Morris Leatherman survey results of why families are not choosing Prior Lake Savage area schools. And the top two reasons were class size and lack of individualized, like knowing my kid. You know, I'm saying it in Michael's speak. So, you know, going back to reducing, again, a reductionist approach to this is say, well, we could increase class size by 2 or 3 kids a classroom, and maybe net several $1 million tops, right? We have to ask ourselves, you know, are we saving our nose to spite our face, or whatever they say? Right. So we net $3 million, give or take $1 million per seat. That's about average with districts. Yet we're going completely against what the research told us. Families are leaving because of class sizes.
Right. Yeah. And being able to communicate all that out is so important.
Yeah, that or the MTSS process.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be the first to say right now, and we've had this conversation at senior cabinet. I question the fidelity of our MTSS process. We don't have an owner of that body of work. It's kind of distributed because we don't have enough FTE to take care of a very key program that goes to meeting the individual needs of a kid, of every kid. Not everybody's gonna get tier 1, about 85%, you know, then the next tier about 15% and so on. So we can say, we'll make some cuts in the MTSS program. Now we lose even more touch with our kids. So folks, I just want you to understand, we will come to you with proposed cuts, but in a district that's already so lean, in what we could net in those cuts, are gonna probably have more impact, not financial, but more impact, negative impact on our overall performance, because we won't be an attractive district. So compared to what everybody else, not everybody, many other districts could be offering. So we have to be very careful about, you know, we can come to the conversation table with, here are 7 things that we could do. But know that everything in this lean of a district is gonna be felt. Sure. So that's why I'm saying it's not a pure reductionist approach. It's actually, it's structurally impossible.
Well, one of the things we didn't do when we cut before is understand the cuts in relation to the impact on educational outcomes for every student. And that's something that if you put that in perspective, like you said, there isn't a lot of fluff there anymore. I mean, there wasn't before, but now there's like nothing. You're actually dropping below subsistence level. So if people say, well, let's cut admin, you know, think about the impact you're making to every single teacher in assuming their own administration costs and the less time that they have to spend with students, the less time they have to review homework, to make lesson plans, you name it. I mean, it all kind of combines. And that's something that needs to be line itemed out so we understand the choices that we have.
Yeah.
But also, conversely to that, when we go out and ask for money, we need to show that every penny that we spend of the taxpayers' dollars is also going to have a positive impact on educational outcomes. And the one thing that I don't want to ever promise is an increase in test scores, because that's not something that just happens overnight. It's not like I give you another $10 per student and boom, you know, it goes up.
Yeah,
It's overall education and learning that we're after, and we know that over time it's going to have a positive impact, and we need to prepare people for that.
Yeah.
And I think if you go back to the student results, and I remember the conversation of our students are happy, but our parents, that we had a much lower score for the parents. Well, the parents are the taxpayers. So if we want our taxpayers to invest in our district, we need to see that level of satisfaction with a Studer-like survey continue to go up, or else they're not going to make the investment in our district.
And getting to the why, like what's the burning why of the parent in the feedback, and that's part of the conversation that you didn't hear from admin tonight. I mean, you've heard it from them in other scenarios, but that tells us, you know, what they're looking for. Now, I want to be very clear too. Like the Morris Leatherman those are folks who've already built chip. Like we have thousands of folks choosing us. I think it's equally important as to understanding why. Why do you stay? And those are the things like, so when teachers are, when you ask the question about if you have a promising practice, are you like meeting with other schools kind of share those practices? Well, we've got thousands of families saying, we love this district. Understanding that, and how do we scale that versus something new? Like make the investment in that which is already working. Right, so I mean, those are the approaches that I think are going to be nuanced in these conversations as we engage, you know, further. So
I like that balance that you were kind of talking about. Like, the parents are the ones or the families, I should say, are the ones paying the taxes, right? And but it's that balance of but our kids are generally happy here. So, you know, when we're looking at, you know, these structural changes, that's the tough part, because you want to keep that. I think if I'm going to have, and I'm a parent myself, but if I'm going to have somebody happy, I want those kids happy. If I have to choose and what kind of decisions I would make as a board member, I want those kids to be happy. I want those kids to want to come to school here and be happy and feel safe and welcome. I get it though. They're not the ones with the checkbooks. I get that.
And so, you know, what we've learned, I think, through that survey and through previous years of where we could have had better communication and bigger opportunities is we have to have a real clear message. And that's come up many times tonight here at the table.
The one thing, talking about a clear message, the one thing that did stand out to me in this memo is the term structural changes, and I feel like I had to read it a few times before I realized it's the financial structure that you're talking about. I feel like people will hear structure and hear, well, we just built that brand new school, we just did this construction, you know, and which is valid. It's a valid reaction. So I feel like even some word choices, I think, will be important, because somebody might see structural changes and think, are they closing, or the other end, right? Are they closing a school, or are they,
Right.
I guess the word structure
Yeah.
just stood out.
Good point.
That is a
That's
good
a good
point.
point.
That is a good point.
Yeah, and I think as we kind of discuss what those structural changes can be, it's
It'll be
things
more
like
obvious.
increasing class
Yeah.
size
Correct.
or increasing the walk distance to schools. That would save on transportation, but I mean, there's going to be negative issues no matter what you,
Yeah, not buying the new version of the math curriculum that we just adopted.
right?
Right.
You know what I mean? I mean, it's gonna have an impact.
Yeah, because just on a structural change, a lot of times people look at, and I'll just pick the secondary for a moment, people look at, well, change your daily schedule. Well, we've talked about this here. We're already on the least expensive daily
Right.
schedule that I know of at the secondary level.
Which, to some of your earlier questions about what changed in terms of outcomes.
Yeah,
And
Yeah.
that was one that you could almost like clockwork watch changes of performance when that change was initiated. So, so when we lost the instructional and planning and advisory time, students suffered.
That is
Supervision
key
opportunity.
to-
Supervision.
Yeah, that, I remember that very clearly, and that reminding the community, however we can communicate
Sure.
those kind of, those major things, it will benefit
Sure.
greatly.
Or the ones that don't seem so major at the time.
Right,
Well, and folks, and
Well, and it-
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
a,
and-
it
and
was a
decisions-
conservative choice, right? It was,
yeah,
we're
decisions
trying-
were made that
Right.
needed to be made.
Yeah.
And
And-
so,
But there was also there's a cause and effect to everything, and being able to say, this is what's happened here in our district, that, you know, to being able to communicate that out to the public as best, for one, that helps us govern as a board the best, and also it'll help us, in, you know, any way we can just be as,
Yeah.
forthright and, clear to the community.
yeah.
One of the things that I know is confusing to the community is the concept of fund balance. They think that's liquid cash just sitting around.
Yeah.
And the way it's been explained, or the way I try to explain it to people is it's not just 2% or whatever. It's we want at least so many months, or at least a month and a half or 2 months, to be able to survive without income from the state. And that's typical in most businesses. You don't go down a bare minimum because you don't know when sometimes your revenue is going to come in on
Sure.
time, et cetera. So you want at least 2 months of your entire company's salaries and expenses in reserves. And that's pretty much what we start to drop on, and that safety net. Because if we have another government shutdown, we may not get money, but we got to pay our bills, right? So you have to have that cash reserve. And people think it's out there to spend, we're just not spending it. And that's not what it is at all. And that's something that we need to kind of put into everyday language, instead of just a percentage of the overall spend, that sort of thing. Actually talk about the meaning of it and why it's there, and why there almost is a statutory requirement, like before we go into operating debt, of having that balance, as Tammy started to explain earlier, because I think that's really important to put in every day.
How you put it was good.
I'm just explaining how business
Yeah,
people
no,
understand it.
But how you
In the reserve.
explained that too was excellent, and
Well, thank you all for your feedback and input, and this is obviously now a public document, so conversations informally will begin. And so my ask is that as you're out engaging, you know, with community at various functions or informally, you know, at Target, do not hesitate to reach out to me. Do not hesitate to request a sit-down, with any of the senior cabinet members around some of the structural things and inquiries that, because we're all thinking about what could give in our respective spaces. And so let us help you understand on a one-to-one as necessary, so that you have a level of response as folks are asking questions. But again, our town hall is coming up in different venues. We'll start getting more formal in our engagement on what this will actually, result into a final recommendation to the board. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to American Education Week discussion. I believe American Education Week is, Martha, I can't remember. Is it November 30th?
13th, next week.
No,
13th to
next.
Mhm.
Okay, so typically what has happened in the past is, board of directors, have the opportunity to go to our school buildings, which we haven't anyways, but in a gesture of thanks and meeting with our administrators, walking around the building and such, and typically we've signed up through Martha, just so they're aware we're coming. And just an informal discussion to talk about it and see if anybody has other ideas, or if we can move ahead with that plan.
So,
What were the dates?
so next week is American Educators Week, Appreciation Week, for the week. And I know historically there have been some tasty pumpkin bars that have been given out or something like that.
You're making.
Yum, only if they have the frosting.
Yeah, cream cheese frosting.
That's right.
So, so yes, that's something that, folks love to eat, so that's great. In addition to that, I think it's a great opportunity for you as a board, in a more formal way, that particular week, to go out to a school and maybe go out to one that you really don't know a whole lot about. And, have a conversation with the principal, similar to what you heard tonight, and just have the principal sit down and walk through the school improvement plan with you. Like, here are, our top 2 strategies, or based upon the Studer data, here's what we're doing around parent engagement at our school. Like, go with a purpose that really will help you from your governance disposition to better understand kind of the workings of a school through that continuous improvement lens. And so I offer that as a suggestion to any of you who would desire. And I know I've talked with you all one-on-ones, but I think that's a great entry point for our schools, because I don't want school improvement plans or anything to be shelf documents. Like, these are living, breathing, this is the work. And so you heard about the work tonight from a couple of our principals. So you might want to do that as well. And I know school conferences are next, no.
It's the 13th to the
Yep.
17th.
Yep, so we have school.
No, American
Parent-
Education Week.
No, I know, but parent,
Next week.
is it the following week that parent-teacher conference?
That actually are during that week.
Yeah, next week.
No,
The following week.
Following.
The following week, okay.
13th to the 17th is American Education Week, and it includes parent-teacher conferences.
Thank
Yes,
you.
I have my weeks off.
Okay.
So,
But maybe not at the high school though, because we just kind of.
No,
Yeah,
correct.
right,
Just
so-
elementary.
yeah, so just know that. And so, so I know that will be an opportunity to even just go observe parent-teacher conference night, walk around there. And just, again, you can't really engage because they're talking with parents, but just to see, like, what do our educators do and what difference are they making in the lives of our families, so.
But as board directors as well, we can organize these visits
Yep.
with Martha, so
Yep.
that administrators know when we're coming and are available.
I can put a calendar
And that
out
you
there
don't
and
all
you
go
can
to
just
the same
sign up
building.
whatever school, so that we make sure that all schools are covered. Is that-
Yeah, that's fine.
Or
A
something.
sign-up genius or something like that would be great.
Thanks, Martha.
Thank you. Do
Thank
you
you.
want me to order anything, the bars or anything?
The bars, yes, please.
Okay, and then remember
With
that.
extra cream cheese frosting,
Yeah.
I think, for
Divide it
somebody.
into 7 ways.
Yeah.
Then we'll
I
contribute
like that
money.
frosting.
So typically what we've done is, as directors contributed money to
Yeah.
that. I think some of it comes out of our fund, but is that wrong? No, we contribute.
Yeah, I think the board has historically bought the trays of bars
Yeah.
for staff lounges at schools.
And are they the ones that the school makes?
School
Yeah.
makes
They are
them.
That's so good.
Yes. So you're supposed morning food service.
So good. I'll pay
Rice
double.
Krispie bars.
You can have two.
Okay.
Thank you. So thanks for that recap. And for the planning. So next on our agenda is a proclamation for Business and Finance Staff Appreciation Week, which is timely given the 5-year forecast we just received. So Julie, Amy, you're on Finance Committee, right? Which one? Both. And would one of you mind reading that and recognize these wonderful people?
1, 2, 3, go.
What if I get it?
Got it, Julie?
Sure. Business and Finance Staff Appreciation Week, October 30th to November 3rd, 2023. Prior Lake Savage Area Schools recognizes October 30th to November 3rd, 2023 as Business and Finance Staff Appreciation Week. This week, we celebrate our thanks and gratitude for these essential staff. Whereas Prior Lake Savage Area Schools has 11 business and finance staff, whereas business and finance staff are responsible for the overall district budget, processing payables and receivables, student nutrition, meals, transportation payments, completing the annual audit, tracking and reporting enrollment, monitoring contracts, maintaining account codes, preparing monthly financials, and ensuring fiscal compliance. Whereas business and finance staff provide accurate and transparent financial reports for our Prior Lake Savage area community and taxpayers, such as preliminary final budgets, property tax levies, audit summaries, enrollment updates, and more. Whereas business and finance staff are overseeing the $116 million budget for the fiscal year 2024, therefore let it be resolved, the Board of Education hereby extends its appreciation to all Prior Lake Savage area schools, business and finance staff for their fiscal responsibility to our district, which ultimately impacts the success of our students, and declares October 30th to November 3rd, 2023 to be Business and Finance Staff Appreciation Week in Prior Lake Savage area schools.
Thank you.
And I would just like to say thank you very much for recognizing the staff. They are some of the hardest working people I've ever worked with. They're able to pivot on a dime when we have to change our priorities, and they're always doing it with grace and a smile on their face. So I really appreciate it. This has just been a great team to work with, and I appreciate them tremendously. So thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate your leadership in that, Tammy, because the health of the team, you know, it says so much about you as the leader, so thank you.
Thank you.
Our next proclamation is National School Psychologist Week. Could I get a board director to read that one? And I think Director Chuka is here to speak to it as well. That'd be great. Sure.
Put my glasses on. To see this little print. All right, Prior Lake Savage Area Schools recognizes November 6th to the 10th, 2023 as National School Psychologist Appreciation Week. This week we celebrate our thanks and gratitude for these essential staff. Whereas during the week of November 6th to the 10th, 2023, schools throughout the United States will celebrate National School Psychology Week to highlight the important work school psychologists and other educators do to help all students thrive. Whereas school psychologists apply expertise in mental health, learning, and behavior to help children and youth succeed academically, socially, behaviorally, and emotionally. They provide assessment, support, and intervention services to students and partner with teachers and other professionals to create safe, healthy, and supportive learning environments. Therefore, let it be resolved, the Board of Education hereby extends its appreciation to all Prior Lake Savage area schools, psychologists, for helping all students thrive, and declares November 6th to the 10th, 2023 to be National School Psychologist Appreciation Week in Prior Lake Savage area schools. And thank you for letting me read this. This one touches my heart because as a child, having a child who needed services in our schools, it's definitely something that I greatly appreciate as a parent. Understand the work that you do, so thank you.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think school psychologists are undeniably an important part of our structure and our systems within special education. So thank you for taking the time. I know I'm up here a lot, but I have, you know, a group of a large group made up of lots of little unique individuals that don't fit the mold of your teacher or paraprofessional. So thank you for taking the time to do that. They really help. I know we talked about it tonight when Joe Kabushik was here about they get involved even at the PST level to problem solve and use their expertise to help, find interventions and different things to help students, whether it's social emotional or academic, really so they can nurture and thrive in an inclusive environment and reach their potential. So the presence of the school psychologist ensures that all students receive the support that they need and really have a significant impact of the success of all students. So thank you for taking the time to recognize them tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for staying so long.
Yeah, thank you.
Not a problem.
And our last proclamation tonight is Community Ed Appreciation Week and National Community Ed Day. Can I get a volunteer to read that? We have Director Dahl here as well, who's lucky person, got to wait till 9 o'clock to be honored.
No, I'm not on the committee, but I'll take it.
Go ahead, yeah.
All right. So proclamation, Community Education Appreciation Week, November 6th through 10th, 2023. Prior Lake Savage Area Schools recognizes November 6th through 10th, 2023 as Community Education Appreciation Week. Our district's more than 200 community education staff, advisory council members, and volunteers provide learning opportunities and resources for our community to develop lifelong skills. This week, we express our gratitude for these community educators. Whereas National Community Education Day will be celebrated on November 9th, 2023. Whereas the Governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, has proclaimed November 9th, 2023 as Community Education Day in the state of Minnesota. Whereas community education staff and volunteers deliver and support a wide range of educational opportunities for learners of all ages and stages of life, from early childhood to youth programs to adult education programs and more. Whereas the members of the Community Education Advisory Councils serve the crucial role of sharing community perspectives to advise the department and the director in the fulfillment of the department mission. Whereas the Board of Education encourages all community members to engage in community education through participation in a wide varieties of activities, programs, and services, helping provide new opportunities or serving on an advisory council. Therefore, let it be resolved, the Board of Education hereby extends its appreciation to community education staff, advisory council members, and volunteers for serving our entire community with learning opportunities and resources to develop lifelong skills, and declares November 6th through 10th, 2023 to be Community Education Appreciation Week in Prior Lake Savage Area Schools.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We had an awesome event on Saturday. If any of you were able to attend, we had almost 1,200 students or children come through for our Halloween event.
Awesome.
And the excitement and the joy just speaks volumes to what our department can provide our community and providing those opportunities. We have an extremely talented, dedicated team, everyone from our early childhood teachers all the way through our adult instructors, our coordinators, and our staff. And it truly is a team effort to provide that high quality service and programming. So I feel very fortunate to be a part of that team, to work alongside all of them. I also want to recognize, as was mentioned in the proclamation, our advisory council. We have a small group right now, which we're hoping to expand and grow and get more people involved in. But their support of our mission and their valuable insight assists us in our program planning and meeting the needs of our community. So we appreciate what they bring and the energy and the time that they give us. And then I want to thank all of you and our district administration and our school staff, because without your support, we wouldn't have the opportunity to provide these great programs and services to our community members. So thank you for supporting community education.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to your team and your leadership.
Yes.
All right, we're done with our proclamations. We're into board governance policy and our board policy review, which is our first reading of policies. We have 9 that we'll go over, and Dr. Hunter, do you want to take the lead on that? Because are they all?
Going through the policy committee, been
Yes.
reviewed at least twice.
Yes.
On the
So,
policy
the policies that you see here today have the track changes that have been brought forward to the Policy Advisory Committee. We hosted our first meeting on October 17th August 17th, and then we had a follow-up on October 12th. Overall, I don't know if you want to go through each individual one, but to go over overall, there's a lot of overall recommendations that the Policy Advisory Committee did talk about at the first meeting and agreed to. One of which was historically our template has included sections even if there's nothing in that section, so that there's a definition section, but there's not actually definitions there. We all agreed as a Policy Advisory Committee to clean that up and get rid of those empty sections. So you'll see a lot of common themes where those will be deleted. We agreed to add legal references when they're available, like cross-references between different policies. I apologize, I shouldn't have put the candy in my mouth. That's accidentally popped off right before my turn to talk. We also talked about as a committee, one of the committee members asked for, and great suggestion to add version dates or revision dates on all of the policies, so that we not only see when it was first implemented and when it was last revised, but everything in between. So thank you to Martha for all of her hard work on getting that added to all of our policies. And then we talked about really the balance between really wanting to make it easy for our community members and our staff to be able to navigate through our policies, but also balancing with the upkeep of that. So we talked about wanting to directly link, when we do cross-references, directly link to those specific policies. But we had a really great, robust conversation as a policy committee to make sure that we don't have broken links and inaccurate links as we only review these 3 times a year. So we agreed as a committee that we will be linking to the overall policy page on the website, not specific to the individual policy, just so that we can make that balance a little bit. Make it easy for them to access it, but also limit the amount of upkeep that it could potentially cause for us. So you'll see that as a general theme throughout all of the changes. Another really robust, awesome conversation between all of the committee members was, as you're aware, the English language is very fluid, not only with societal changes, but legislative changes. And one of those things that we're seeing right now is revolving around pronouns. So we have different pronouns that are now in legal statute, and also based off of societal changes that can change. And so what we talked about as a committee is wanting to be inclusive, but also not wanting to have to constantly change and update as things evolve. So we made, after a really great, robust conversation, again, from multiple stakeholders, we came to a collaboration around just removing pronouns and just using the noun itself, so that instead of saying his or her supervisor, we say the employee's supervisor, or instead of saying if he or she, we say if the candidate. So just kind of hopefully making sure we're remaining inclusive and up to date with societal changes and statutory changes, most importantly around the legal references, without potentially causing us to have to update them over and over again as things change. Because again, we review things every 3 years, which is, I think, a very great schedule in comparison to some districts I'm aware of. But still, if we have a statute that changes, that's gonna have to be something that's immediate. So the committee had a really great conversation around that. So you'll see that throughout all the changes as well. And then as much as possible, the committee all agreed to try to remove as much procedure out of our policy as we possibly can. So you'll see a lot of really big sections being deleted from some of the policies tonight. And it's not that that's going away, it's just that the committee agreed this is not necessarily policy work, it's more procedure work. It needs to be removed out so that can be, one really great example is in the travel reimbursements, taking out the policy from there, keeping it high level, the procedure out of there, keeping it high level policy. So I just want to be clear that that's not our administration or the Policy Advisory Committee's recommendation to remove that procedure. It's just to remove that procedure from the policy.
So where will those live then? In handbooks? And
Correct.
things like
So in the
that?
department's
Sure
policy,
that
so the business office forms, I'm just going to keep picking on Tammy here. In her accounting manual and procedures document, it lives there, because the conversation that the Policy Advisory Committee had, again, with that cyclical review over only 3 years, if we have it in there what the mileage actually is at a point, I don't even know what it is right now, 0.51 or whatever that is, but then it changes, we don't want to go back to policy and change it again. Or if the amount of meal we pay for breakfast, lunch, and dinner when somebody travels, we don't want to go through a policy committee to change that. We want to be able to change that through procedures. So, speaking to policy more in general terms than getting down into the weeds. So, sorry, I went over a lot there in general terms, but you'll see that consistently throughout all the policies that are here for you today. I'm happy to answer any specific questions on any of the policies.
Well, I just have a question about the overall procedure. When the policy is, so I know obviously we use MSBA template policies, but when the policy is the exact to MSBA, are you referencing it on the policy? Like 401 is pretty exact to, so are you referencing the cross-reference as MSBA policy 401 or not?
No.
Okay.
So, our legal references are only gonna be statutes or any sort of specific major case laws that are referenced on a legal standpoint. And then any of the cross-references are only our internal policies.
Okay, that's what I didn't see that on there, so I just wanted to double check with that, so thank you. You answered some of the questions that I had. I have a couple questions as we go through each policy, but I don't know how we want to do it. If we want to go through policy by policy or,
I think you could just ask at this point. Yeah.
okay. So I didn't have any questions on 401, because that's pretty much an exact of MSBA. 402 is an exact of MSBA. 404, I had a couple questions on.
There isn't one for MSB on 404, is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, that is ours, it's been ours for a while.
Okay, so the question I have is why were the in-laws removed? Can you help me understand that? So it's under definition of an immediate family member, so why were in-laws removed?
Because we changed it to be employee spouses, so family members of employee spouses would cover in-laws.
So what about my daughter's getting married, and that would be my in-law, that'd be my son-in-law? So wouldn't that be?
So it'd be your spouse's.
Yeah,
Your
my spouse, no,
spouse's.
it's my daughter's husband.
Okay,
So I'm just asking, because that's an in-law, that's a son-in-law.
This is staff, just.
Yeah,
so
no, I
you
just
know.
know it's
Okay.
staff, I know,
Okay.
but it still relates to staff
But it's
because of staff.
family members of the employee's spouse.
Family or- But
Would
it's
cover
like,
in-laws.
okay, let's say a teacher has a daughter, the daughter got married to a young man. Would that young man be able to report to that teacher? That's an in-law,
I get what you're saying.
that's why I'm asking.
Yep, I get what you're saying. So, what you're saying is not specifically to your direct in-laws, but your siblings' marital status to other individuals.
My child, it's my child. It's my daughter.
Sorry, sibling, child's, yep. I think that was an oversight in that. I don't know that that was the policy advisory committee's goal to change it. So that would have to be language we would have to look at unless.
Isn't that covered though under
It
family
is.
members of employee spouse?
No, it's not an in-place.
Right.
It's the immediate family members of the spouse, child, sibling. We did actually discuss that because we had those issues. So the thought was that in-laws, because it's immediate, was included in the language. So your son-in-law would be your immediate family because they're married to your daughter. And that was discussed. Now, I'm not sure if that needs to have legal approval.
Because you took out daughter-in-law,
Right.
but it's son-in-law.
Yeah, because it's your child that is immediate family. Your child's spouse, that is, that's what it was discussed, but I'm not sure if you want to consider legal concern in that.
Yeah, I'll have to go back to legal review on that as well. I don't recall if we did get legal review on that one off the top of my head, but I can look at that and share before it comes back to the next board meeting.
Under regular corporate rules, the son-in-law, daughter-in-law would be considered immediate family and therefore be part of the nepotistic rule type of thing.
Okay, so then the next thing I have a question on, just like one other question on this policy. Under general statement of policy number 5, it says that the candidates, so a prospective employee, okay. The district will conduct criminal background checks of all prospective employees at the candidate's expense in accordance with board policy, employment background checks. Now, as a business employee, I've never paid for my own background check. Is this a standard operating thing that, and I'm just thinking about like, you know, getting people, is that a deterrent? I'm not sure it is. It is, but is, you know, for somebody who's seeking employment, could that be a deterrent for coming and wanting to work for our district?
We haven't run into it being a deterrent. I do believe it is common practice between school districts. We do have opportunities to help pay for background checks for individuals. We do that more frequently with volunteers. I can't think of anything off the top of my head from an employment standpoint that we've paid for. If we do request a more in-depth background check that costs more because of specific states it goes to, the district does cover that. But the basic fee of the background check has gone to the employee's expense, the candidate's expense.
Okay, I'll just add that, just ask. And then 405 was pretty much an exact of the MSBA.
I did have a question on 405 while we're
go
there.
ahead. Yeah.
If that's okay.
Yeah.
Under general statement, under D, eligibility for an application of veteran's preference, the definition of a veteran. Should we include a definition of a veteran under definitions?
We try to stay away from including definitions that are statutorily defined, because if it changes again, then we have to change our policy. So that definition is very clearly defined through the Veterans Preference Act.
Yep, okay.
So it would not be my recommendation to put that definition within our own policy.
Thank you, yep, that makes sense.
And then under 412, just when you answered some questions, the only question I had, and maybe this goes under the procedure, maybe it's in the procedure. So under reimbursement, requests for reimbursements must be itemized. I just had it like, do you have a dollar amount? Like, I know from a business standpoint, anything under $15, I don't have to put, but maybe again, that's procedure, you know what I mean?
It's all procedure.
Okay. And then the other thing is about the automobile travel should be reimbursed at the mileage rate set by the school board. I thought it's set by the IRS, not by the school board.
It has been set by the school board in the past, but we almost always go with IRS standards. This was a discussion a few years ago. The reason why it's taken out of here is per what Emily said before, that if the IRS does change the minimum, then that would be something that wouldn't go through us. That would be a financial procedure in Tammy's area.
So should it be IRS?
Or no?
I'm going to leave that up to Tammy because the policy committee agreed to take that out. It's too detailed for a policy and it's procedural.
I mean, it's in policy, so I don't know that it necessarily has to be.
Don't we have to pay the IRS rate or no? Okay, I didn't know. I thought every business had to pay the IRS rate. Okay.
They don't have to, no, it's the minimum. If you want to deduct it, if you want to put it on your.
Yeah, I understand, yeah.
I was just thinking I didn't question it up, but just since it was brought up, but if the IRS changes it, if we keep it as the IRS, if we have it as the IRS in the policy, if the IRS makes change, then we have to bring it to the board. So we're trying to alleviate that? Okay, I get it. Sorry.
And then
I think having the
Things are
language,
moving slower.
I think having the language,
Sorry.
having the language in the policy like this allows the board the flexibility should the board choose to have the rate be higher than what the IRS allows for.
Okay.
Because IRS is the floor.
Yeah.
We can choose to, as an employer, pay more.
Well, in some cases.
Not that I'm aware that we ever have.
Well, we pay by monthly on some of the contracts. I remember reviewing that. So we give them a set dollar amount by month versus by dollar, because we talked about that.
But then you don't then you don't submit.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
I think this was specifically addressed for people that are turning in.
Right.
For conference.
And then one other question, on the MSBA policy, under general statement of policy where it lists all the things that people can expense, transportation, meals, lodging, registration fees, they include tips. We don't include tips.
It's in part of our procedure that you'll see reimbursement includes up to 15% tips.
Okay, I was just curious, because it wasn't in
procedure.
here, so.
It's in the procedure.
Okay. And is there any policy that's, or procedure that says when people have to submit them? But like, I have to submit them at the end of every month. It's a real pain in the butt. So, especially when you travel a lot. But is there anything in here?
Procedure.
There's an
It's a
IRS
procedure.
rule that if you submit it after,
Fiscal year.
I think it's 60 days, then it has to go through payroll, not accounts payable.
Okay, so there is
Becomes
a procedure
taxable.
with that. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry, that was just a crazy little question I had, all right. Then 509 was pretty much the exact of MSBA. I didn't have anything on that one. The only question I had is about the definition of a habitual truant child. And how does that match up to procedure? I don't even know if that question is valid here, so we can move on if I don't want to talk about
The
that.
statute referenced on that one.
Yeah, I see that. Nope, I see that. I just want to make sure that our procedures follow that policy. And then under, let's see, 511, student fundraising. This is exact of MSBA except for the last line, which I thought, the last line was very interesting to me. So I know that this particular part of this policy has crossed my desk or my email, and I'll explain why. It says, and like I said, this is not an MSBA, so I'm trying to understand why it's in ours. Salespersons, agents, or promoters of any kind shall not contact students or employees on school property for the sale of merchandise or the promotion of ideas and interests without the express written permission of the superintendent of schools or the designated representative. And the reason I ask that is because we have had concerns about certain posters, particularly from the National Education Association, which is the teachers union, which would be a promotion of ideas. And so my question is that,
This is under fundraising,
well, it says though,
right, for the
or the
purpose of.
promotion of ideas.
For the purpose of fundraise, for
And
student fundraising.
Fundraising efforts. That's the purpose of student fundraising efforts. And one of the reasons why under section 1, we emphasize the purpose is simply because the conversation of the policy committee went all over the board with this. So this was under student fundraising, not under anything else. So that's why that statement was reiterated, because it was a conversation that went down a few rabbit holes that had nothing to do with student fundraising.
Okay, so this is very specific to student fundraising.
Right,
The
that's
title
the
of
title,
the-
511, student fundraising.
Yeah, no, I see that, okay, all right.
And then the definition of student fundraising is also in there too, that was added in.
Okay, because that's where I thought the promotion of ideas could get a little sticky if people were, looking at that. Okay, the next one, now the next two are a little bit hairier, I'll be really honest with you, they got a little bit trickier. 534, school meals policy. So my question is with the changes in the high school, this policy, I just felt like when I'm reading it, it doesn't address that our high school has a different kind of policy when it comes to the school meals versus the elementary and the middle school. Like, I felt like this policy overall was overall for the district, but yet we know that our high school is different. For example, under payment of meals, it says, provide to all students at no cost up to 2 federally reimbursable meals per school day with a maximum of 1 free breakfast and 1 free lunch. And that would not apply to the high school.
But he says each school that participates in the free school meals
Right, and they're
program,
not participating,
and
it
they're
doesn't
not
apply.
participating.
Is there a way to put that on here though? Because I could just,
That-
I just feel like that's,
It's right there, under payment of meals, to be.
Each school that participates and our high school doesn't,
And the free-
they're
School
they're
that's-
subjected to 1 and 2.
Okay, so
because-
could we write each school that participates, or, I don't know, I just feel like, maybe not, okay.
I think
I
the
just thought it
concern
was-
comes.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, is that would it be nice to say, like, list the schools that do participate and the ones that do not? I think that goes back to the overall arching concern of the policy advisory committee, is if that were to change,
Right.
then we're not only having to go through this thing, we're all of a sudden bringing back a policy to change it. So like one thing, spoiler alert, it'll come up in the next round of policies that come up, is removing like the list of every single activity we have for sports out of policy and referencing that it will be listed on the website. So that we aren't constantly going back to policy to say, okay, now we are offering pickleball instead of this, or
Yeah.
whatever, I only could think of pickleball for some reason.
Okay.
But, so I think that I would assume that this specific question wasn't discussed at the policy advisory committee, but, just hearing the conversation, I would like to rely on the website to communicate that.
And then, I thought there was just, a kind of a disconnect between payment of meals A and lower negative account balances B. Because it says, students have a meal account. When the balance reaches 0, a student shall not be allowed to charge second meals or à la carte items until the meal account balance has sufficient funds to cover the purchase. And then when you go down to low or negative account balances, it says that, the school district will make reasonable efforts to notify families when they're below 0, and then families will be notified of an outstanding negative balance. Once the negative balance reaches $10, families will be notified by email through the school meals program. If no payment is received for 30 days, the parent or guardian will be contacted. So basically, like, I read it as, A says you're not gonna be able to buy anything, which I know is not true, because my kid always buys
But it
stuff.
doesn't say that. It just says that you're
Well, it
allowed
says
to buy second
students have
meals.
when the balance
or à la
reaches 0, a
carte.
student shall not be allowed to charge second meals or à la carte items.
Second meals are à la carte, they still get double.
Yeah, no, I know, okay. All right, that's the only thing. And then under unpaid meal charges, the only thing I wrote here was under B, the school district will make reasonable efforts to collect unpaid meal charges classified as delinquent debt. Unpaid meal charges are designated as delinquent debt when payment is overdue. So, like, is it gonna go to collections, like, if it's right overdue, or do we need to say, like, overdue by 90 days, 120 days, like, it's right there, it says the debt, if you're overdue, the debt is considered collectible, and efforts are being made to collect it. So,
If we go to 3B, it mentions if no payment is received for 30 days, the parent or guardian will be contacted. So I imagine you can kind of make the leap to say at least 30 days.
well, that's why I'm
It's not
wondering if we need to
explicit.
state, like, how many days before it goes into collections. Because we don't really.
So I could be wrong, we don't.
No, I know we don't, that's why I thought it to be so funny.
I'm certain we don't.
No, we don't, but we leave that in there just to make sure that people understand that it could, but I don't believe we've ever sent anyone to collections.
No, I don't think we would, based on some of the other
Yeah.
language in here, so,
And
yeah.
then the restrictions prohibited are Minnesota statute 123B.37 due to unpaid student meal balances, so that kind of covers most
Right.
of it anyways.
That's what, I thought that line in there was quite interesting, even though it's in the MSBA policy as well. So, that's all I had on that one.
Does anybody else have any other comments or questions?
And then the next one, I had more comments on 533 on student wellness. That's the last one, I believe, and so I'll wait if anybody else has comments, I'll get to there. What's that?
533?
533 student wellness. I had quite a few questions on that one.
Oh, sorry, that does bring up a good point. We did talk at length at the policy advisory committee about how our numbering structure is different than MSB's numbering structure, and how it is extremely confusing, especially when you're spending a summer trying to track down all the legislative changes that need to happen to
Yes.
policy. But instead of rocking the entire boat and completely redoing all of our numbers, we decided as a policy committee to do it when that number was free. So 533 wasn't already being used by another policy of ours, so that's why the policy advisory committee is recommending changing this number from 514 to 530.
Great.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
And then the other thing that we also described is the fact that MSBA, so school districts went one direction when MSBA didn't have one, and MSBA doesn't cover all of them because they only cover certain topics anyways. And that we're not, and for what we just talked about, we're not gonna go forward and try to make them all equal because they will simply get out of sync again. So that was the other thing that was kind of alluded to and what was just stated, but I wanted to make that clear that we went through a discussion on that. And the policy committee agreed that we're only gonna change them again when it makes logical sense and not try to keep up with one or the other.
So if we're ready to move to 533, like I said, I have quite a few questions on this one. So I did compare 533 student wellness to the MSBA policy, and our policy is quite different, and that's fine. But a couple of the things that stood out to me is the first line, the purpose of this policy. So when I read MSBA's, their purpose of the policy is really centered around student wellness. And the word that was concerning to me in ours is, it says, the purpose of this policy is to assure a school environment that promotes and protects students' health. And that word to me was just concerning because, like, as a parent, I am ultimately responsible for my students' health. And so when I think about the policy, and we're promoting student wellness and healthy eating and healthy activity, where does protect students' health have to do with the wellness aspect? You see my point? Because I'm thinking of health. I'm thinking of like vaccinations, and I'm thinking of like going to the doctor and getting all your, you know, all your exams. And a school district does not, they're not responsible for that, right? Like I have to go get my kid a sports exam, a physical, you know what I mean? So when it says protect students' health, I see that word health, and again, that's not in MSBA's policy. Theirs says, the purpose of this policy is to set forth methods that promote student wellness, prevent and reduce childhood obesity, and assure that the school meals and other food and beverages sold and otherwise made available on the school campus during the school day are consistent with applicable minimal local, state, and federal standards. And that's where ours is different, and it says, the purpose of this policy is to assure a school environment that promotes and protects students' health. I feel like that puts us up for a risk when we're saying that we're going to protect students, individual students' health versus promoting wellness.
We protect their health by having like a sick and safe type policy where somebody's sick, they need to stay home or they're sent home. That also protects their health without getting into the question of vaccinations or anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good point.
The other part of the language that is used is also part of the overall, all the schools that participate, the entire schools district that participates in the FDA program. The term obesity came out of the FDA food program that we don't universally, particularly at the high school, participate in. That word and the way that the MSBA standard is specifically for the schools that participate in that program for the whole district. So that's where the word obesity came in.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily agree with the word obesity. I kind of find it offensive, to be honest with you. But when, like I said, when I look at what is this policy about, it's about wellness, and that's why when it said protect students' health, that, like I said, that I just okay. So I don't need to explain anymore. I think everybody's clear what my concern is there.
I think, I'm sorry if I might add, I think that one of the major differences that I've noticed between our policy, soon hopefully to be 533, currently 514, is if you notice the purpose and the general statement of policies are a little bit intertwined between the two. So when you do look at
hard for me to navigate. It's really hard.
So when you do look at the general statement of policy of MSBA, it does refer to in multiple different times promotion of students' health, encouraging, fostering, good health fosters student, encouraging healthy. It refers to health quite a bit throughout the general statement of policy. And I'm not sure what happened when this was first developed, but it seems to me that there was some attempts to consolidate some of these and move things around between the purpose and the general statements. And at some point, some of it it's direct word for word as well. But I do notice that through MSBA's, they do refer to health quite a bit as well.
Yeah, and I also felt like our policy, MSBA policy focused a lot on physical activity, where ours was focused, it seemed like a little bit more on education versus activity. I mean, MSBA even had written in their policy where they said there was a requirement for teachers under physical activity. There's a whole section under physical activity that says opportunities for physical activity will be incorporated into other subject lessons where appropriate. And then classroom teachers will provide short physical activity breaks between lessons or classes as appropriate. So like there was a focus on physical activity where ours is more focused on physical education. So I don't know why, I just noticed that. And then small little thing to point out, under general statement of policy B, this is literally just language, the school district encourages the involvement of, we list students and then parents, and MSBA lists parents and students. Minor, again, I just noticed that as a change.
Can you tell me again where you're at?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, general statement of policy B, it's just the way they list, they list parents and then students, and we list students and then parents. So that's totally minor, but every little word counts is what I'm learning.
So I'm sorry, just to make sure I'm clear on this, are you asking for it to be flipped?
I would like it to be flipped, because like I think your parents should be first and then your students.
I disagree on that.
I disagree on that.
The school district encourages the involvement
I don't want
of
to take
parents,
us back to
students.
policy committee to just change the word order. We included everyone in here.
The
So why
policy
do we
is
have it different,
student
I guess?
wellness,
Yeah.
as student being the focus.
The school district encourages the involvement of, and this is when they're involving them in monitoring, implementing, and reviewing school district nutrition and physical activity policies. And we list it as the school district encourages the involvement, and they start with students and then go to parents. And MSBA says parents first and then students. And then kind of a bigger thing is I wanted to know, MSBA policy has a whole section on, and I didn't know if this tied back to law, because honestly, I looked a little bit and I couldn't find it. But there's a whole section on public involvement, and it says the act requires, well, it starts out and it says, the wellness coordinator will hold meetings from time to time for the purpose of discussing the development, implementation, and periodic review and update of the wellness policy. All meeting dates and times will be posted on the school district's website and will be open to the public. And I read that kind of several times in their policy. Then under it says record keeping. It says documentation demonstrating compliance with community involvement requirements, including requirements to make the local school wellness policy and triennial assessments available to the public. So they're talking about almost having like a wellness committee. And I was like, I knew we didn't have a wellness committee, and so I wondered if that was required under Minnesota state statute anywhere, to have a wellness committee.
I do believe we have a wellness committee. If you go to our F, implementation and monitoring, it speaks to the wellness committee will evaluate the policy and the district's compliance.
Okay.
And then also speaks to that the policy will be available to the public on the district website. Staff data will be analyzed in the student survey, a couple different things in that section.
So we do have a district wellness committee?
I believe we do.
Oh, okay, it's just not a board committee. Okay.
And then I do believe we also discussed, at the Policy Advisory Committee, I believe they asked Director Emily Malone about where it's posted in the schools. There was a conversation about that at the Policy Advisory Committee as well.
Okay, good, thank you for clarifying that. And then under communication with parents, under C, this is
Are you on ours or?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on ours, yeah.
Okay.
So communication with parents under C, and I did compare it to MSBA. And the difference is I'm not a big fan of when we talk negatively versus speaking positively. And this speaks negatively, and it says the school district discourages students from bringing food and drink items for birthday celebrations, where MSBA says MSBA encourages healthy lunches and snacks. And it's just the difference between a positive and a negative.
In regards to birthday, could you please read their whole statement?
What's that?
Do they reference birthday in their
They
sentence?
do not reference birthday. The
And
way
this
they
has to
reference
do with
this.
birthdays.
This has to do with bringing food and drink from outside the school
For
into the
birthday.
school due to allergy. And we did have Emily and I believe another person talk about anaphylaxis network and everything like that. And explaining the statement to the policy committee, which is for the health and well-being of all students so that we don't introduce allergens into classrooms.
So MSBA reads, and I understand that. I'm talking about the negative versus the positive wording. This is MSBA. The school district encourages parents to pack healthy lunches and snacks and refrain from including beverages and foods without nutritional value.
So under B, the school district will support parents' efforts to provide a healthy diet and daily physical activity for their children.
That's not
And promotes
snacks.
opportunities for parents to view online what students are buying with their lunch money. And E, we don't specifically state those same languages, but it means kind of the same thing.
It's just, I'm just talking about the negative,
Yeah.
because
The
we had a lot of
language-
negative in our
I'm
NORA
sorry,
policy.
what they say.
Refrain is also a negative.
Exactly.
That's-
That's what I was thinking.
What I'd like to just look
Discourage
into
or kind
is
of-
that language choice might be more like a legal protection, that we discourage it, so we're doing our efforts to not allow it to happen, so it might be a legal compliance issue that I'll be happy to look into. Typically, when those languages are used, it's typically to make sure we're in compliance, doing our part to make sure people aren't exposed. But I can look into that further.
That's all I have.
Any other feedback on policies from board members? All right. Superintendent relations, thank you, I should say thank you, Emily, because that was our first
Thank you.
go. Thank you, policy committee folks, because it's good to have this new process in place. Okay, superintendent relations, nothing? Informational items for future, any future agenda topics from board directors?
I'm going to go ahead and bring one up, and it's not really an agenda topic as much as we have to look forward to the fact that we really should, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Emily, correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe we need to look over the policy on policies and the changes in a future study session. I think that was policy 208.
There are some legal changes to what has to be reviewed on an annual basis.
Right.
For the board's consideration to make changes to the policy. And then there's also, with the policy committee, policy advisory committee now being in place, that question if the board wants to change the cadence of how many times it comes to the board meeting.
Right, so do we need to talk about these policies we just talked about 3 times and then vote? Or is unless there's consideration for it to go back to the policy committee by a board consensus, can we go directly forward to the vote? And the concern was that if we don't change some of that, or at least give the board the option, that we're gonna end up in a heck of a backlog.
So it's bringing forward board policy 208 to discuss as a board the cadence of how we go through them because of the adding of the policy committee. That's kind of the
In
recap.
addition to the legislative changes, so what needs to be
Yes,
reviewed
and
annually.
legislative changes. So we bring that forward for board policy discussion. It wouldn't go through board committee, it's a board policy.
Correct. All 200s are board policies.
Is that the will of the board? Are we thinking yes or no? I've heard
I'm fine, I
thumbs
think
are
we need
down.
to be really transparent
Sorry,
when we're talking
yes.
about policy with our community and what their expectations are, so.
Yes, so I feel
I'm a
like-
yes, but as long as we're doing it at the board table, that's.
Yeah, oh, that's why we would add it, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, okay.
That's fine.
Okay, we'll bring that forward, 208.
And can I get clarification on when 606 and 904 are gonna come forth? Because I thought it was gonna be before the end of the year. We are now in
That is on
November.
our schedule. Fiscal year, not calendar year.
Okay,
So the 400s, 500s, 600s, and then we also added 904, based off of the will of the board, is all on schedule for the fiscal year review,
so that ends when?
June 30th.
All right, are we good? Any other future agenda items? Okay. We will adjourn and go to closed session, but we'll take a break.
Show me where these desks
Don't try my free one.
Hey, Cassie, is this the same?